Hey guys, it's me again coming to you live, but not really. This was originally going to be a completely different video, but having watched the last two episodes of the Dahmer Netflix series last night, I decided instead to post just a little review of my feelings about the series. This series is something that everyone and their mother has been talking about. Now, even though you can literally go on Wikipedia and find all the information available that there is to know more or less about Jeffrey Dahmer and the Jeffrey Dahmer case, for anybody who is sensitive about spoilers, there may be some in this review, so just a heads up about that. So I knew very little about Jeffrey Dahmer and the Jeffrey Dahmer killings up until I watched this documentary. I was 7 years old when he was arrested. And even though I'd heard his name sprinkled throughout pop culture, I heard his name pop up in jokes every now and then for decades, I didn't know anything really about the man or what he had done except that he ate people. Now, this particular series is 10 episodes long, and I must say that the first half is very different than the second half. It's almost like watching two different TV shows. For the first 5 episodes or so, I just was like, this is wrong. Like I shouldn't even be watching this. This is exploitative. It felt like the creators of the show were deliberately making the viewers as uncomfortable and grossed out as possible, detailing the crimes excruciatingly. I was ready to give up on it after about the second episode, but it's unusual because this series seems at least partially self aware that it could be seen as exploitative, and thus it feels like halfway through the creators are like, oh shit, we got to devote some time to the victims and their stories, otherwise people are going to yell at us. And I certainly understand why a lot of people would find it uncomfortable to watch. However, I would recommend that if you find the first half of the series uncomfortable, to stick it out for the second half of the series. I also find this series fascinating because it's not just straight up horror, it also shows the systematic failures that led to Jeffrey Dahmer being able to do what he did for so long. The series depicts 4 different parties that it's implied were either complicit in Jeff Dahmer's crimes or somehow responsible. The first of which was Jeff Dahmer's grandmother, whom he lived with, I think, not long after he was kicked out of the military. The grandmother observed Dahmer's bizarre behavior, observed him bringing home men, observed loud banging and screams in the middle of the night, which Dahmer claimed were just him screaming from waking up from nightmares. And of course, the biggest thing that the grandmother witnessed was Dahmer bringing home that young African American man who was having car trouble and seeing him looking like he was at death's door in her living room and wanting to get him help, but her grandson just resisted, claimed he was just drunk, and they ended up just putting him on a bus where, of course, he ended up in a cornfield and then waking up in a hospital. The second party was Dahmer's dad, who was certainly, just like the grandmother, well aware of his son's unusual behavior, his inability to hold the job, getting kicked out of the military. But despite this, the father, in a lot of stories like these, the father is depicted as being very abusive and neglectful. This wasn't the case with Jeff Dahmer's situation. The father appeared to genuinely love and care about his son and want to do right by him. The problem was that he was in denial about a lot of his mental issues, about his sexuality, and I think he just kind of assumed that he would just grow out of it, or that it was just a phase. It was also kind of a general attitude of American dads at the time. If you think that the mental health system is a mess in America today, if you go back a few decades, I mean, getting help for somebody like Jeff Dahmer was almost impossible. Although it probably didn't help much, and the series does address this towards the end, that Dahmer's father did teach him how to experiment with animals. I think most people knew at least one kid in elementary school who did terrible things to animals, and we all know what most of those kids ended up becoming when they became adults. Then we have Dahmer's mother, who was batshit insane. She was popping pills like Halloween candy, even while she was pregnant with her son, which undoubtedly fucked up his brain. And she continued to be crazy for the entirety of his life, or at least up until when he was in high school, and she flat out abandoned him, took his brother, and left them all alone, which was probably a big catalyst for his crime spree. Not to mention the source of Dahmer's abandonment issues. I was really angry at Jeff Dahmer's mother throughout this series. Just the way that she would just rant and rave about UFOs and make all kinds of excuses why she couldn't be a decent mother to her children. When she tried to kill herself and failed, I was disappointed because I really wished that she had succeeded. She chose drugs and conspiracy theories over her family, and because of her addiction, her son never had a chance. There was no way that he was going to grow up having lived a normal life no matter what. And then finally, we have law enforcement. A year in jail for sexually molesting a minor. The way that that judge treated that poor Laotian family was disgusting and atrocious. I hope that he, along with those two disgusting cops who let that 14-year-old boy die, went on to live miserable lives. So many of Jeff Dahmer's victims were either ignored or outright scoffed at just because they were either minorities or gay. The two cops who let that 14-year-old kid die and then went on to make racist prank phone calls to his family afterwards and then got awarded by the police union and have their jobs reinstated, I wanted to punch a hole in my TV. Conservatives love doubling down on stupid. Those two pigs were perfect examples of people who, rather than admit that they were wrong, decided to dig their heels further into the mud. And in the end, they failed upwards and got rewarded. And Jeff Dahmer ended up murdering more people. Anyway, all in all, I would say that the first half of this documentary did make me very uncomfortable, but I think I was drawn to it because it was a fascinating character study into a person with severe mental illness. As a person who suffers mental illness as well, obviously nowhere as bad as a cannibal, but I am fascinated, I suppose, when it comes to Hollywood depictions of people with mental illness. Now, if Jeff Dahmer was alive today, it's doubtful that he would have been able to live a normal life, but I think at least due to reforms in mental health and law enforcement, and because of the fact that I think most of his activities would have been tracked online, he would have been apprehended or given treatment before he had a chance to hurt anybody. Anyway, those are my quick thoughts. I thought it kind of straddled the line between being exploitative and informative. It is definitely not a feel-good kind of TV series. It is quite graphic. Not as gory as you might think, but the implied suggestion of violence is enough to make some people definitely at least a little queasy. Anyway, that's our show for today. If you guys would like to see me make more reviews of TV shows, movies, video games, let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe. and I'll see you guys later.